Everybody, my name is Jeffrey Carr, and I want to make sure that I am recording, and I think I am. I am a almost 40-year disciple of a spiritual master named Gururaj Ananda Yogi, and that's his picture back there. And he was actively teaching from the late 70s to the mid 80s, and he passed in, I think, 1988. And I and many of my fellow disciples were in our 20s back then, and starting families or just trying to start careers in a very different place in life. And I had already been practicing in various traditions, Zen and others, when I met him. He was a big surprise to me when I met him, and he still is a big surprise to me. I have, in those 40 years, pursued many other spiritual paths. I'm a very active meditator and a very active spiritual practitioner. And now over the years, he was always my guru, but I wasn't always reading him or paying attention to him. I was involved with Kashmiri Shaivism. I was involved with Vedanta. I was involved with Tibetan Buddhism for about almost 14 years, so steady immersion in that. He was always there. But now I've come back to him with all this other experience, and I am really impressed. He is, as he would say, a teacher, a spiritual teacher. He used the word guru, now a somewhat controversial term, but he used the term guru. But he said he didn't come from a particular tradition. He was trying to speak spiritual truths for everybody. And he was part of a wave of teachers from India, and his background, yes, uses Indian, Vedantic, and sometimes Buddhist terminology. He refers to Christianity a great deal. But again, he was a universalist, as he said. And he was, all those stories you read about the amazing times that go on back in the day with people with gurus, genuine gurus. He did all of it. It was a wild and magical and crazy and just transformative time. All of us were very deeply, I keep admitting people here, very deeply changed by our years with him. And it's taken me till now, I'm still trying to understand some of the depths of what he said. He used a very informal style, sometimes teaching with great seriousness and profundity, which some of us understood partially, some of us more than others, and then often interspersed with crazy jokes and strange uses of language, which would make him utterly delightful, sometimes frightening, always just amazing. So I've been reading his satsangs about once a month, and I offer a little bit of commentary. And these satsangs, as he would have said, and I'm sure all of you have found out, they mean one thing when you read them when you're 20. If you read them again when maybe 5 years of spiritual practice, they mean something different. And trust me, they mean something very different after 30, 40 years of spiritual practice. They continue to increase in their depth and their subtlety, just because we do. So this particular satsang, which I'm going to read, they were given spontaneously. He didn't prepare his lectures. They were prompted by questions from us, from the audience, the people attending these talks. And the talks were usually given in spiritual retreats. And there are hundreds of these talks. People in the group have transcribed them. What I've done is I've taken the talk, the transcript of the talk, and done a very light editing job, just to make it a little bit more presentable for publication. And also, I had to take out some of his outrageous jokes, although in this particular one, I keep in a couple of the jokes. And also, some of his metaphors and his use of language can get wonderfully playful, silly, and outrageous. And I've kept some of it in this line. And when you're confronting a teacher, a guru like Gururaj, you're confronting the real thing. And it isn't all polite all the time and cleaned up and all made sort of PC. He can be quite outrageous. So this particular satsang was prompted by a question from someone in the audience. We were called chelas, which is an Indian term for a disciple, for chela from the audience, who asked about how do you measure spiritual progress? And at first we think, okay, But actually, we're all pretty subtly, what the word would be attached to this idea of spiritual progress. I get a kick out of the fact that mindfulness-based meditation, for example, has a very clear notion of progress. They say the reason you meditate is you're all stressed out, right? Well, if you meditate and you do all the techniques that we teach you, you will be calmer. Other people meditate because they want to get rich or they want to overcome their problems, their hang-ups. And they figured the less hang-ups, I either get rich or I'm less shy or I'm less frightened. I must be making progress. Okay? So many of us sit and do our meditational practices with goals in mind. The blue chip goal that I'm familiar with is the Buddhist one. Why do you meditate? Because you want to become enlightened. Why do you want to become enlightened? Because you want to save all conscious or sentient beings. That's the terminology. And therein hangs the whole, called the Mahayana, the middle school of Buddhism. All right? So somebody asked Gururaj, okay, in other words, I have goals. I'm trying to get somewhere. And a lot of us maybe have been meditating for 6 months or 6 years or 60 years. And they feel like, well, what's happening? I don't really know if anything's really happening. Am I making any progress? I mean, how do I know? I don't feel any different. And frankly, a lot of us, when we learn to meditate, let's say you meditate for 6 months and say, I didn't notice anything happening. I just felt the same. So to hell with it. And then you go on to the next little spiritual gizmo, or you go to Bermuda. Go have a vacation. Some of us sit down and they say, I want to meditate because I want to be a happier person. And then you find out to your amazement, gee, all these things came up in my life and I'm actually less happy. It doesn't work. It doesn't work. This is not what I wanted. And you quit. Okay? So a lot of subtle stuff about how do you know? Why are you doing this? It doesn't seem like it's turning out necessarily the way I wanted to. So that's behind, I think, some of the questions. So Gururaj immediately comes back. And as I've said in other talks like this, I think he gives the entire satsang. He's a genius at this. He gives the entire satsang in the first paragraph. But usually we don't get it. In fact, in the Tibetan Buddhist tradition that I'm familiar with, this is the way they say they teach. You go out like, oh, master, what's the nature of enlightenment? And usually the teacher will just say, or the whole, as the famous one, Mapashya, I think his name is, the disciple of Buddha, Buddha just held up a flower. Now, if you're sufficiently sophisticated spiritually, you get it. But the Tibetan Buddhists tell us that most of the time, we just kind of like, So the teacher gives it to you a little bit, like a couple of paragraphs. If you're pretty sophisticated, okay, now I get it. Most of us don't get it. Then you're given a big exposition. And guess what? Most of us still don't get it. So we listen the rest of our lives to this stuff over and over and over again. Gururaj very much operated on that kind of thing. And it's implicit in this talk. So Gururaj just came back. First paragraph, I think he's given the entire satsang. Listen. Is it necessary for you to judge spiritual progress? On the spiritual path, you don't have signposts that can be perceived by the 5 senses, by your hearing, touching, smelling, tasting, and all of that. In other words, it isn't necessarily a material progress, like yoga, let's say, is. And in any case, the moment you start analyzing your progress stops because you're bringing the mind into action. The progress on the spiritual path is the progress to peace, which is devoid of all mental ramifications and logics. Those are just meanderings, which only the mind can produce. But the spirit is so still and peaceful that it doesn't need to show you the signs of your progress. Actually, he's just told you exactly. He says this has nothing to do with the mind. You can think, you can talk, you can debate, you can study. It has nothing to do with the mind. He says that spirit is so still. What does Gururaj mean by the spirit? Maybe we'll get into that as we read on. I'm not going to try to give you a mental definition of it. It should become clear. He's drawing a distinction between what the Buddhists call, or Tibetan Buddhists call sem, the reactive, thoughtful, analytical mind, the judgmental mind, that little voice in your head that says, I don't really agree with what he's saying, or God, this is so boring. All the sem. Or should I be doing this? Maybe I should read another book. I know I got to do a retreat. All that level of the mind. The spirit, he says, is totally still. There's nothing. The spirit is so still and peaceful, it doesn't need to show you the signs of your progress. Uh-oh. A lot of us got this thing called the inner guru. So we like to meditate and get in touch with the inner guru. And then a little voice comes in and says, oh, your spirit, you're feeling so loving. You're feeling, oh, yes, yes, that's my voice of the inner guru. Gururaj said, no, spirit is still. He said, that little voice, I'm sorry, it's just your ego. It's your little fantasy. Okay? Gururaj says, it has nothing to do with the mind at all. Progress has nothing to do with the mind. What am I going to do? So he says, so you might not be able to see the progress yourself, but the others around you will be able to notice it. They might say that you are a different person, that something's changed in you. You'll find people remarking how wonderful you are. For example, for those of you who are sincere meditators, I can see clearly on your faces the serenity that's produced by meditation. I can see it in the body language of how you move and in the relaxed way you sit. For example, 5 years ago, you might have moved a certain way, but after 5 years of meditation, you're moving in a completely different way. There might be far more grace in your movement. Your eyes will have that added sparkle. Your smile will not only be the pulling of the lips, but your eyes will be smiling as well as your lips. You might not notice that twinkle that is there, but the others will notice it. They'll say, that person has such a twinkle in their smile. Have you guys ever seen people at the airport, especially notice it's young men, a lot of it, and they're twitching their feet constantly? You ever notice that? The other thing, I'm going to give you a tip. Did you know that people who are moving in meditation, did you know their bodies are moving because their minds are moving? Did you know that? You notice how people, they're compulsive, they need to smoke, they need to do something with their hands, they get nervous. And some of you are like that. Occasionally, if you're upset. You might not notice it, but other people will notice that you're far less agitated than many people are. Just check out people. Many people are crawling out of their skins. They can't wait to get drunk. They can't wait to get something because they need distraction. They can't, well, I'm addicted to the damn phone. They can't wait to check their email. It's all a function of anxiety. Yes, your body is different. Gururaj is saying, they'll notice it. Not only that, but this was interesting. Somebody who is a companion to one of our long-term meditators, I won't say who, she wrote me a sweet little email. She said, I want to send you something, and I feel like now's the time I can send it to you. And I said, she said something about Laureata, because of you and Laureata. And I said, well, why don't you send it to my daughter, Charlotte? She just adores Laureata, and it'll really mean something to Charlotte. And she wrote back, no, I want to send it to you. I met you and Lorietta 20 years ago. She said, it made such an impression on me. And I have absolutely no memory of it, and I have no memory of making impressions on people. I'll tell you, sometimes I try to impress people, and I think it's far less impressive. People are being influenced by you, whether you know it or not. Okay, and I got to get off my high horse about this. I think, frankly, if you would like to calm everybody down from being freaked out about the virus, just smile through your mask. Just be nice. You're doing a hell of a lot more better, I think, better good than writing off on your Facebook page about their people are it just makes everybody worse. So here's Gururaj. For example, when I came here from England last year, I was very ill after having that long trip, and I was totally fatigued. But everybody said, as you English people say, "Go blimey, you look 10 years younger." But I didn't notice it. But you notice it. Don't you see? The eyes cannot see themselves, and yet at the same time you feel something. You do feel that there is progressively greater and greater stability within you. That now the world is going to remain the same. Be sure of that. You can't change the world. There has always been murder, pillage, rape, and all kinds of things. You can read it in the Bible and even in the scriptures before the Bible, before the time of Jesus. The world is not any better today than it was thousands of years ago. So don't be concerned about the world. You can't change the world. So many Christs and so many Buddhas and Krishnas and Gururajas have come and gone, but they haven't and they can't reform the whole world. It's not possible, but you can reform individuals. Gururaj has taught that particular teaching at many times, and it's been a big influence on me. I don't sign petitions, and I don't go on marches, and I don't do all this. I just try to be a very good person as best I can, as best as God will let me be. And I do my spiritual practices very regularly. I've been really influenced by what Gururaj says. And I was having a discussion with a Lacanian analysis. I'm getting a little message from somebody I think who can't tune in. I can't tune them in right now. From a Lacanian analysis who said that do-gooders, and you know Gururaj didn't like the do-gooders very much. He's complained about them. He said do-gooders, and he used the example of Gandhi, which Gururaj complained about Gandhi once. And the famous story he told us about Gandhi, which scandalized some of us in the audience because Gandhi, oh, he's wonderful. What's wrong with Gandhi? He said that he was insisting on making love to his wife while his father was dying in the other room. Is that true? I don't know. But this Lacanian analysis type person was telling me that obsessive do-gooders are often horrible to their immediate people around them. They're so obsessed with saving the world that they can't relate to ordinary, like their children or their spouses. Is that true? This guy's just pointing out. In my case, yes, I've noticed that, especially people who want to convert you to their cause, or they want to make you, you know, you're a bad person because you like this, or you vote for that person, you're a bad, you know, that's good. I'm saying one person's trying to get in. So let's go on. You might wonder how that mechanism works. Here's Gururaj talking about it. The guru is like the gardener in the parables of Jesus. The gardener just goes on planting his seeds, as the scriptures say. Some seeds will fall on fertile ground and will grow, some on barren ground and so will not grow. And some will fall on the rocks for the birds of the air to eat. But the gardener does his duty. He carries on planting. The guru can see more deeply into the heart and in the soul and into the mind of a human being, just as the gardener can see how his flowers are growing. The gardener can see how the tomatoes are growing before you might pluck them. But the tomato itself does not know how red or how ripe it is. In the same way, human beings have a limited mind and they can't see themselves until they reach the ultimate. When the ultimate goal of becoming totally self-realized is reached, The test will be that you will feel the total universe merging into you, and you will merge in the totality of the universe. Beyond that, you will capture within yourself, in your physical form, the personal God, but you will also operate as the impersonal God. So the person, the personal God, and the impersonal God and the primal energy become all the same. Now, boy, that's quite a big thing to unpack. What's the personal God? He once said it's the sum totality of basically everything you feel what the personal God is. For example, I love Jesus. Krishna is my God. I love my guru. That's the personal God for you. Guess what? This is a line from the sadhana I do every morning. The deity is the deity self-originated in oneself. It does not exist elsewhere. How do you feel Krishna so deeply? Because you are Krishna. Otherwise, how would you know what Krishna's like? That's the divine you that you're really all enthralled with. That's the personal God. Now, for us spiritual hipsters out there, the impersonal God. That means if you're a physicist, the contemporary physics says, well, it's all, it's all improbability. It's it's quantum possibilities. It's a quantum universe. Say, oh, does that mean you're a quantum being also, an illusion, a quantum, like an accident? And they, well, I guess so. Or it's all energy. It's all just light and energy. We're all beings of light, Oh, when you go to use the restroom, are you a being of light right then? Yeah. When you're all pissed at somebody or jealous, are you also a being of light? Maybe not quite as much light. Anyway, we get all enraptured with various ways of talking about the absolute. The Buddhists tell us that the absolute and the relative are exactly the same. Gururaj tells us that the absolute and the relative are absolutely the same. What on earth does that mean? It means that divinity is happening right now. And we could go on and on about that. But why don't we just go on right here with Gururaj? As long as one perseveres, then reaching the goal must come. What is the goal? To really get it. You are divinity. Absolute, relative, the same. Really get it. Guess what? If you stop identifying with this miserable little illusion that you think you are, and you realize your divinity, everything's going to be just fine. How could anything be wrong? Everything is occurring in your universe. What's not to like? Problem solved. That's what Gururaj is talking about. Suddenly the whole universe swims into you. You swim in the whole universe because you realize, oh my God, that's all showing up in experience. And let me stop there because I could go on and on. As long as one perseveres, then reaching this goal must come. As long as you keep driving, you're going to reach Philadelphia or New York, so just drive. But how can you tell how near you are to New York unless you drop into a gas station or you meet somebody on the road? It's like, well, how many more miles do I have to go? He's talking about like using a metaphor for enlightenment or self-realization. How much farther am I supposed to go? All these roads look the same unless you have certain landmarks, like an old building or something else with which you're familiar. So similarly, at this stage of your spiritual path, you're not familiar with the end, the goal yet. In other words, you cannot possibly figure out what self-realization is, because the mind, it's the realm of the spirit, and the mind can't go there. You are an explorer, and what you will discover is that which is in reality yourself. You're going to discover yourself, self-realization. It's like the story of the musk deer, which I must have told you about before. This deer was running around here and there trying to find the source of this fragrance of musk. And musk is a fragrant substance. So finally, the musk deer was totally tired. It just collapsed. And then it found that the musk was all the time in its navel. So you see, it's all there. It's just a matter of expression. The musk deer is a very traditional metaphor in Indian philosophical thought. The musk deer apparently produces a fragrance. And we look here and there and everywhere for the divine fragrance, which of course is divinity. And actually all the time it's us. We didn't know it. We kept looking for it elsewhere. The deity is the deity self-originating in oneself. It's not met elsewhere. So the people around you will be able to see and judge the changes that have taken place in you without realizing it yourself. Changes on the spiritual path are not so easily perceived by yourself because they're so subtle. They are not gross. That means they're not obvious. They're not manifest. You don't glow. You don't get all holy. And yet, you'll develop certain mental attitudes by which you can have some idea. For example, something that you might find to be ugly, you might find today to be very beautiful. In ways like that, you'll notice these little changes within yourself. Watching your behavior patterns can show you how to behave. You can actually feel the kindness welling up within yourself without trying to be kind. If you try to be kind, it's not really kindness. Never try to be kind. It must be spontaneous expression. If you're just trying to be kind, or if you're trying to be charitable, what's at play? It's not your spiritual self. It's the play of your ego. Because you're trying. And the ego is forever trying, either negatively or positively. Unfortunately, it tries mostly negatively because it's enforced, empowered by your impressions and your samskaric self. Gururaj used to rail in humorous or not so humorous a way about pretense, putting on acts, putting on costumes, pretending to be something. Most or all of us at different times, we're trying to be good. We try to be spiritual. We try to be honest. Even though the impulses that come out from within us sometimes tell us to do something opposite. Another little trick that used to happen to us that you would just give in to any stupid impulse that came into you. Like some of this might have happened to you. You get angry at somebody, so you blurt out at them. You so-and-so. Well, guess what? You can get angry at somebody, but you don't have to necessarily tell them you're a so-and-so. What Gururaj is saying here is the ego, our limited sense of self, our false self, is forever trying. It's always acting. Most of you are very familiar with this. One of the aspects of spiritual practice, which we all do, is watching the falseness, the falsity, as Gururaj calls it. At the same time, Gururaj is saying spiritual progress can be noticed. Something that you thought was ugly, you suddenly find to be beautiful. In general, I'm going to make a generalization here. If you've been doing meditation for a number of years, can you remember way back, it's hard to remember, maybe ask a friend to remember. Are you quite as frightened by things as you once were? Yes or no? Are you quite as irritated by everything as you once were? Are you quite as greedy and needy? I really gotta get this, whatever it is that you want. I can't live without it, or I gotta have it. Are you really as needy or greedy as you were? Again, 5 years. If you're really sensitive, you'll notice it in 6 months. But you got to do not just meditation. This is the package, the spiritual practices. If you really and honestly say, well, I'm still the same old jackass or asshole I always was. Or if you can say, I've gotten worse, you're either lying, deluding yourself, or you haven't been doing your spiritual practices. Period. So, the worker, that's you. The worker just does his work. He just carries on with his spiritual practices. He gains some new understanding by being in the company of a sage, a holy man. By the way, all the scriptures, the Vedanta people and the Buddhist people tell you, first of all, keep holy company. You can do it in books or just actually meet nice people, be around good people. The other thing which I was reading about recently, which is true in my case, is you will notice that mysteriously, if you do spiritual practice very seriously, a lot of the negative situations or negative people around you will gradually go away by magic. They just do. And one person I was reading saying, it's because if, let's say you used to like to hang around people that like said, come on, let's go beat up, some bad people. They get bored with you because you're not interested in, it isn't faking, or you just lose interest in being an asshole. It is possible, like argumentative people, or angry people, or greedy people. They don't like you much anymore because you're no fun, and you just don't hang out with them as much. Also, you'll notice your situations of life will slowly and inevitably will clear up, except for the persistent samskaric nonsense that you're supposed to work on your whole life. But a lot of the minor stuff will go away. So the worker does his work. He just goes on with the spiritual practices. He gains new understandings by being in the company of a sage or a holy man. His understandings change. His attitude in life changes, and he finds his life becoming lighter and lighter and lighter. Yes. Now, most people want instant change. That's the trouble. They're filled with expectations, and that's just an obstacle, because expectation is the mother of disappointment. So you just keep on working as you should be working, like you were working in a factory or an office. And at the end of the month, your paycheck is going to be there. You don't need to worry about your paycheck when you're actually doing your job. At the end of the month, automatically, the envelope is on your desk. And the messenger, or even the boss and the manager, just puts it on there in your desk, even if you're out, even when you're home. It's there for you. So you don't have to worry about progress. You should be more concerned with how much one has changed oneself, how much kinder and how much more compassionate you've become. You've become more aware of the communications you have with people. That is the progress you should be sought for, because that is tangible process, while the subtle progress is not recognizable by yourself. It's like your eyes. They can't see themselves. You need a mirror to see your eyes and to put the false eyelashes on and all these other kinds of things. You need a mirror. In our case, the mirror is the world around you. Others may feel that you exude a certain fragrance that makes you more and more aware of what they become more and more aware of who you really are. This works in a very subtle level, and very slowly it infiltrates and penetrates your conscious mind. When it permeates your consciousness within the limits of your conscious mind, you will recognize the changes that have taken place within yourself. 2 points. Just because I was saying earlier about the ego trying to fake it and putting on pretense and putting on false faces all the time, that does not preclude the notion of spiritual effort. Gururaj would say you can meditate until doomsday, and all you'll get is doom unless you put in the daily effort. That means you have to consciously try, and that means a little artificial, to not say the nasty word, not get angry at the person ahead of you who tells you to put on your damn mask, not to get mad at the political people and the figure, just to figure, well, some people like these guys, so let's, it's okay. I don't like them, but it's all right. You have to train yourself. So Gururaj is not telling you to say, oh, it should all be automatic, so I'm just going to keep on being an asshole. No. If anything, your divine part of yourself will tell you instantly, your conscience will tell you instantly when you're doing something stupid or harmful or cruel. Like that. That's part of your clarity that you get from spiritual practice. He also says here that it permeates your consciousness within the limits of your conscious mind. You will recognize the changes that have taken place within yourself. So what is he saying here? As you become more and more saturated with spiritual practice, you will just, well, one thing is you'll like spiritual things. You'll like nice things. You'll like kind things. You'll like beneficial things. You'll tend not to like horrible things or cruel things or mean things. You just won't like it. You'll because he's changing. Look at it in yourself. It's like the fetus in a mother's womb, he says. The fetus is not conscious of its growth, but the mother is conscious of its growth because she can see that her stomach is visibly becoming bigger. She can feel the baby kicking around, but the baby itself is not conscious of this. To the baby, it's just an automatic reflex. It just does things instinctively without any thought, but the mother is aware of the kicking. To the baby, the mother thinks good thoughts, lovable thoughts, and is joyous. The child just feels that instinctively, but without any analysis. If the mother is always angry and is shouting, the child also feels it instinctively, and it leaves the mark on the child, good or bad, without the fetus being conscious of it. In the same way, the fetus of the spirit is there. And it's totally unconscious of your physical and mental body. It's just the energy. It just flows. It's like water. It's like a river flowing. So whatever your mind thinks or is influenced by has an effect on the fetus, on the spiritual body of the fetus. But the actions of a person do not affect the spirit at all. That spiritual fetus that is within you is not affected whatsoever. That inner force, that spiritual force, does not necessarily come out of its own accord. You have to give it direction or channel. Just as if you dig trenches alongside of a river, the water will automatically flow in the trenches. Similarly, your spiritual practices are necessary to make that energy flow in whatever direction you are wanting it to flow. The water itself feels nothing, but the ground will get the benefit. You become grounded. You become stable. You have your feet firmly planted on the ground. This is how a person judges his progress. What the heck is he talking about with the fetus and all that kind of stuff? You remember at the beginning, you drew a big distinction between the mind and the mind can never understand the spirit, and the spirit is basically not paying attention to the mind. So how can you progress spiritually? He's saying right here, by doing spiritual practices, doing conscious effort towards spirituality, you're not really working with your mind. What's really being affected is the spirit within. It's your mind is gaining increasing clarity so that the spirit manifests spontaneously through you. That's the mother and the fetus in her womb. The mother thinks very happy thoughts. The fetus is not aware of what mommy's thinking, but the fetus is being influenced by the attitudes and behaviors of the mother. You are, when you are, he called it the process of unfoldment, by your thoughts, by your behaviors, by your beliefs, by your actions. You're allowing a greater, that river of the spirit is not itself changed, but it allowed to flow into your life more. You're, in certain ways, you're less occluded, you're less blocking it. Anyway, that's my interpretation of what he's saying with this metaphor of the mother and the fetus. Progress still cannot be judged truly because these things are being judged by the limited mind. The scriptures say, judge ye not, lest ye be judged. But I say that's only partly true. Don't even judge yourself. In scriptures, the judgment applies to the object. But what I'm saying is to accept the object, but also include the subject. Don't judge yourself. In other words, to say, well, I don't really think, I don't know if I'm being spiritual or not. He's saying that, no, you can't judge yourself the effect that you're having on that divinity within. You cannot judge the effect that you're having on that divinity within, because the divinity has nothing to do with reactive mind. Nevertheless, your actions, your thoughts are allowing that spirit within, the divinity within you, to shine in a way that maybe other people can see, but you yourself don't necessarily see it. You maybe can kind of vaguely sense it. For example, there was a man in the ancient times of India. His name was Agnishama. He was a murderer and a robber, and the people used to say, take everything I have, but just don't kill me. He was a very well-known robber. So one day, a great sage passed by him, and the sage said, go ahead, take everything I have. You can even kill me. You can even take my life. Well, this made Agnishama think that he had met a man who said that, he said, I could take everything. He could take even his life. It's yours. Take it if you want it. Well, this started the robber's mind thinking that, gee, I met here a sage. Because of those thoughts, Agnishama, the robber, murderer, became Valmiki, the author of the great epic, Hindu epic poem, the Ramayana. The sage gave Agnishama a spiritual practice, a mantra, which was Rama, which is the name of God, Rama, because he had the inherent qualities of becoming a sage himself. The seeds were there, but they had to be awakened. And this mantra was appropriate for him. So when Agnishama used to murder and kill, he used to say, Mara, 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 which means kill, kill, kill. But if you say Mara, 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 Rama, 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 Rama. If you say Rama, Mara, Mara fast enough, it becomes Rama, Rama, Rama. And this mantra was given to him by Naranda, a great sage who knew the inner self of Agnishama, the robber. Do you see? He became the great Valmiki because he was non-judgmental of himself. If he had to judge himself based on all those sins he had committed, he would not have become the sage who wrote the Ramayana. Pretty subtle story. Now, there was, in a certain sense, you're not the least bit in charge of your spiritual progress. You yourself cannot manipulate the spirit or the divinity within. The seeds are there. This guy who turned into the Valmiki, the author of the Ramayana, he continued for a while to be a raper and a murderer, because, or like, he continued to be an asshole or a bad person. Nevertheless, slowly, all that was eclipsed. All that was overcome. Not by his own effort, but from the effort of, or in this case, we could say a mantra. The mantra is basically from the Guru. And Gururaj will go on to that a little bit more right now. So don't try to judge your progress. Work for the sake of work, as the Gita would say. Just keep on doing your thing. Just keep on working, and the progress comes on your own. You'll feel it in some way or the other. And if you exclude that beautiful fragrance, you'll find people coming closer and closer to you without you even having to ask them to come closer. Like an analogy I've used many times before, you don't have to go and try to call all the butterflies. They won't come. But if you make your garden beautiful, the butterflies will come automatically. Oops. Do you see? Our job in life is to make yourself beautiful through the practices you're given. The practices are so finely worked out. Each practice is interrelated with the other. They seem apparently so simple, and yet they have a very deep effect on you. You're progressing, and it's only with a qualified master, a true master, that progress, well, the master can see that progress. And if you're going on the wrong road, the teacher might pull you, even if it's harshly or kindly, to the right road. But he can see the direction very, very clearly of every individual human being that is in close contact with him. And to be in close contact with him, the chela requires a certain amount of devotion. Not worship, You don't offer worship like some of these gurus to make you come and prostrate yourself in front of them. No, you offer devotion, like you're devoted to a friend. If you love a friend, that creates that rapport. By devotion to the master, who's only a channel, you draw the divine energies to yourself that help you in your progress in life. Very important. Spiritual devotion is not worship. In fact, worship is just about your ego. Oh, Master, I love the Buddha. Or, oh, Swamiji, please deliver me, protect me. I love my Swamiji. That's just your ego crap. Devotion, you can get quite angry at your guru and it's just fine. It means that you constantly, in some level, are recollecting, bringing your attention to the spiritual ideal or your spiritual guru. You will find, I hope it's true for all of you, I assume if you've been meditating for a long time, you know, is it's very strange. Many, many strange little coincidences happen in your life where you're protected, or things are taught to you, or given to you, or sent to you, or people talk to you. Very strange, but all of us who've been doing this for a number of years take this for granted. I do. It's the grace of the guru. That sounds corny or strange, where you haven't been meditating as long as we have. So you don't know. It's not about belief or some kind of faith. It's about devotion, awareness, love. I like the way he said it's like the way you think about your friend. You don't constantly thinking about one of your best friends or your spouse, hopefully. But nevertheless, you know, they're always present somewhere in your thoughts. That's the way it should be. Not this, oh, Bhagwan, please send your grace, Bhagwan. You know, bullshit, that kind of crap. These things can easily be done by a true teacher, true master. Sometimes he does not even use words or a touch. He just a glance. By the way, I remember several distinct glances given to me by Gururaj. Once when I lied, he was bent down and I was talking to him and I said something which is a fib. He instantly turned up and looked at me. I never did that again. For example, as I'm sure you can verify, you've only been here in this meditation retreat for about a day and a half, but I can see on the faces of each and every one of you, without exception, that you are much more calm. The guru, as well as yourself, are radiating something all the time. The radiation of a true master, you can call it vibrations if you want. The radiation of a true master is so powerful that it overcomes the radiation or vibration that you are radiating. If your radiation is negative, it becomes positive because the stronger radiation overcomes the weaker radiation. It's like the big fish eating the little fish. It's one of the reasons that you feel calmer, you feel more relaxed. You've forgotten the world outside. Although because of habit, your mind reverts back to what Auntie Mary is doing at home, or how your dogs and cats are doing, or things like that. Those are just surface things, but inwardly, you feel calm. And he goes on. So it's very important to travel long distances and to attend these meditation retreats. As you know, these meditation retreats don't cost nothing. It's expensive to be paid for all the accommodations and the food. It's the world, unfortunately. Now, in ancient times, I remember that these things were not necessary. The chelas used to come to the guru, and there in the forest, the chelas used to build their own little huts to live in. And the guru used to impart knowledge to them, and in turn, the chelas used to look after the place. As the spiritual food was provided by the guru, the physical food would be provided by the chelas. By getting together like this, a greater rapport starts between the chela and the guru. That rapport is like the invisible electric lines that charge you up to a greater and greater progress. It cleanses you. It makes you calmer. It makes you realize that there's something beyond yourself. It makes you more inquiring about what that is which is beyond you. Therefore allows the question to arise, why was I born? You see, it's about inquiry, spiritual self-inquiry. You know, that nonsense people say, spiritual teaching should be for free. Really? Some people have a related notion. It's like, God loves us. God will save us. Really? God kills everybody in the world. Everybody alive now will die. Kills everybody. Sometimes it's not so pretty. Even the nicest people sometimes die terribly. Really? So you think it's all for free? You think spiritual teachings should be for free? In other words, you don't need to help God to help you. You don't need to do anything. You don't need to give any money. You don't need to try. You don't need to do anything. God will somehow take care of it. Bullshit. In fact, by taking care of divinity or doing your spiritual practices, you want to know what a guru really wants. They just want you to do your spiritual practices. That's all they need. They don't need you, all your goo-goo words, which are mostly insincere anyway. It's not for free. You have to put some effort in it. You have to pay for it. And he says here is all this stuff, that connection, the electricity said, which is very real from spiritual devotion, leads to self-inquiry. Why was I born? In other words, why am I here? What's this life about? Who am I? All that fosters self-inquiry. To the self-realized person, there aren't any more inquiries left because he's gone beyond all inquiry. After you've captured the city, for example, you don't need to go around counting how many houses there are in the city. You've got the whole city. You own the whole city. And of course, your clerks and the bookkeepers and the treasurer and the accountants and the IRS will look after how much you've got left and will tell you what you own. Progress is seen more by others than by yourself, but you can experience the progress by knowing that you've become calmer, more still. It doesn't come overnight. I didn't promise you a rose garden, but I can promise you a rose garden if you'll accept the thorns as well as the roses. How can the rose even exist without the thorn? Where's my major focus? Shouldn't be on the thorns. It should be on the rose, the beauty of the rose and its fragrance. Long story short, spiritual practice and sincere involvement with spirituality means participation in the great sufferings of life. But instead of saying, why me? I deserve better. He'll explain in a moment. How do we work with the difficulties, the thorns of life? It's all there for the uncovering. If you're sleeping under 4 blankets on a very hot day, what do? You'll start sweating and feeling uncomfortable. So remove the blankets one at a time, and you'll feel cooler and calmer. Just so, through spiritual practices, you remove the veils, the ignorance, the misconceptions. You remove the blankets on a beautiful hot summer day, and soon you'll feel very peaceful and not sweaty and hot. That's what spiritual practices will do for you. I know that at the end, it can be, or at the beginning, it can be a little hard. So attending spiritual meditation courses and hearing different viewpoints and looking at things from different angles will make the work much easier for you. This is the most important thing that you can do in your life. When I was in the film world, I was involved with acting and directing and importing and exhibiting films, you name it. And I was with all these big producers who were multimillionaires. And when I was in business, I consorted with multimillionaires, and not a single one of them was happy. Their whole idea in life was turned to the acquisition, to greed. They were not happy because their direction was towards something very, very temporary. The multimillionaire has to die one day, but he's not going to be able to take with him all that wealth he's accumulated. So why that great waste of energy? After all, you can only sleep at one bed at a time. You can only drive one car at a time. Not like Rajneesh, who has those 93 Rolls Royces. Do you remember Rajneesh? Or one of these Arabian princes who has 500 women in a harem. You can only sleep with one of those women at a time. And it doesn't last very long anyway because he overdoes it. He burns himself out. I'm talking about practical things. You're all grown-up people. Like it's Arabian prince thing. The spiritual path does not burn you up. It energizes you. It's forever lasting. In this lifetime, let's say you have 100 miles to go towards enlightenment, and you've gone 10 miles in this lifetime. Remember that in the next lifetime, those 10 miles that you've already covered are not going to be removed. They're going to be there to your credit, and you'll go on to the 11th mile. This is how you progress. That's why the beautiful hymn says, lead thou me on one step at a time. There's a very famous passage in the Gita where Arjuna, who represents all of us, is talking to God in the name of Krishna. And poor Arjuna is saying, you know, you tell me to do all this stuff. I don't think I can do all these things in this life. He says, and you know what? If I try to live a good, spiritual, wholesome life and I don't get to do all these terrible things that I used to enjoy so much, he said, and at the end of it, if I die, and I've not even been able to enjoy myself raping and pillaging, which a bad warrior does. I've been a good warrior, and I don't even get to enjoy that. And now I die, and I haven't been self-realized. I haven't been enlightened, so I wasted it. And Krishna says, no. I forgot where it is. He says, you never lose it. It never gets lost. That's what Gururaj is referring to. This one of the passages in the Gita. But if people want to have all the steps there in an instant, they can't even climb this building in an instant without going up all these stairs. Most of you are on the second floor. I'd like to see anyone go from the downstairs to the upstairs in just one jump. You're going to have to climb those steps. It's the same on the spiritual path. You're going to have to progress step by step as life opens up. As I've said, there will always be turmoil in this world, but you're going to have to become steadfast. You just have to persevere. It's not an easy road, but it's a worthwhile road that is permanent, instead of all the impermanency that you find in materiality. The passage in the Bible, lay up your treasures in heaven where they will not rot, where they not be despoiled by the insects. A very famous passage. It's true. And guess what? As one of my dear teachers said to me, I said, I was complaining about something, and he just looked at me and said, Jeff, he said, it's all right. There'll always be another life. Sobering. Gururaj is telling us the same thing. Most of us don't really believe in another life. We're like little kids. Give me my toy. Give me my toy. I want my toy. And they, he said, give me, it's like, there's billions of toys. There's always new toys. Or actually, it's like those multi-millionaires he talked about. Oh my God, the market went down. I've lost $500 million. How much money do you have? Well, I had 24 billion the last time I counted. I don't have enough. That's materiality. Now, that doesn't mean you have to ignore materiality. If you have a little Austin or a Volkswagen motor car, I think he calls it a motor car, there's nothing wrong with buying a bigger car and enjoying the comfort if you can afford it. Nothing wrong with that. But your main attention should be on that which is permanent. The big flashy motor car you just bought is not going to be permanent. That big flashy motor car which you've acquired might just have to go to the garage every month, or you might get stuck on the road. That's materiality. But in spirituality, you're not going to get stuck. It goes on and on. It blooms like a flower. You can't stunt it. You can't stunt the growth of a tree when it's well established in the ground. That's what progress is all about. Progress involves the acceptance of things, but also looking at things in a totally different light. You look at things in a light that gives you greater courage and strength. That doesn't make you say, I'm weak, 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 but that makes you say, I'm strong, strong, strong. What if you really knew that all of your problems were there were blessings? What if you really knew that everything that drove you crazy, that you hated, were there for your own benefit? What if you really knew that? If you had the devotion to really know that, teach you tolerance, acceptance, or love. It's the mental self, which is changing all the time, that says, I'm strong, I'm strong, I'm strong, I'm strong. Remember that you're drawing more and more on the strength that is within you. But if you keep saying to yourself, I'm weak, I'm weak, I'm weak, then the mind does not draw on the strength that is within you, but instead is just running around in circles. This is a misuse of spiritual energy. And I'm doing a lot of preaching this talk, but I'm going to give you a tip. Did you know that you really are divine? Everything that's happening within you and out you, everywhere like this, it's all you. It's all your responsibility. It's all in your awareness. You can choose to be extremely annoyed with it, or you can choose just to it's just playful energy. And I'm going to stop there because this is Gururaj's satsang, but you don't have to be that tortured little soul that you are, because if you want to think of it this way, you're the child of divinity. You're the expression of divinity. You're divinity's plaything. Everyone's progressing. Even if you have bad experiences, you're still progressing if you regard those bad experiences to be lessons to be learned from. And this includes everything in life. This is why you were born. You're born into a school where you can learn all the time. Every happening, everything is a lesson in life to learn from. That's how you progress. Now, sometimes the master slaps you with a cane, but that's good. It adds to your progress, so you don't make those same mistakes again. You've suffered this pain because you've made this mistake. And if you say to yourself that I'm not going to be bitten twice, I've already been bitten once, then everything will lead to progress. But that progress can be expedited rather than make it just take its own course. It can be reined in, like a horse is controlled by the charioteer, Krishna, and the horses are in control. You can be the master of the chariot. You are the Krishna, that power, the energy that controls the horses. And that's achieved by spiritual practices. That's where you slowly identify not with your limited self, but you identify with the divine self. That's who you really are. I'm the divine self. The divine self that is having cancer. The divine self is broke today. Okay. That's a big one, I realize. But I think that's what Gururaj is getting at. It's up to you where you want to, what you want to identify with. The story you tell yourself. Change your story. That's what you're born to learn how to control. You ask the question, why am I born? The answer is simple. You needed to be born to learn. And if there was no need to be born and no more to be learned, you're a self-realized person that does not need to be born. The necessity is only there because of a need. This is the best relation, that thing that people say all the time. Well, it was just meant to happen. Which isn't necessarily true, but this is one way you can interpret that. He's saying the necessity is there because of a need. You're here to have these experiences. That's what you're here for. Good and bad. You don't need to eat food if you're not hungry. The hunger is there, the need is there, and therefore you eat food. So the necessity comes first, the necessity of having birth and rebirth. It's like what Buddhism says about the wheel of karma. You have to get off the wheel of karma, the wheel of recurring birth and death. You have to get off of it, because if you try to jump off at any place, you will break your neck. Again, this is a reference, I think, to the Gita. Very wonderful story. So Arjuna, the great hero, who represents all of us, he was supposed to go to war. And he looked out in the battlefield and he saw everybody he knew, all his relatives, all his friends, all these people he admired. He said, I'm supposed to fight all these people? He says, wait a minute, I'm not going to do this. This is bad. I don't want to do this. And he says to God, to Krishna, he says, why are you making me, you're telling me to do these awful things. Why? Why am I supposed to do anything? And he wants to get off the wheel of karma. Gururaj says you'll break your bloody neck if you try to get off it that way. The end of the Gita, basically, God, Krishna says to him, now you understand. This is just your duty. You were born to do all this. Just do it. Do it in a spirit of devotion to me, to dispassion. That's the lesson of the Gita, acceptance and dispassion. So the wheel has to be stilled by self-realization. Then you'll climb off the wheel. But there's a way of doing it that makes things go faster for you, that makes you cover the same mileage without the effort of walking and getting tired. And when I come to a meditation course, I have to take 4 planes to get here from South Africa. And at every airport, I have to walk those miles and miles. I had a motorized vehicle to take me from the gate to the other gate. That's what these spiritual practices do by covering the same mileage without effort. That which today you might regard to be so much effort will just become so much pleasure. It's like you having to mow the grass. You find it so much effort. You've got to mow. You say, oh God, I've got to go mow the lawn. It's an effort to you. But if you would just find it a pleasure to use that same energy to play 10 sets of tennis, the more effort has gone into the tennis, but it's become a pleasure. It's a game. By mowing the small piece of lawn in the garden, that's effort. But similarly, well, he goes on and says, tell your young son, today you have to mow the lawn or no pocket money. That's what life is all about, and that's why you were born. You'll threaten a child. He goes on and on. The point of it he's saying like this is that you take the irk out of work. You see what we're doing as devotion to the Lord. As the Gita says, you offer seva, you offer your work in this world, a service to the Lord. He says, there lies the difference between a true master who is ever loving and false ones who are never loving but always grabbing. They're always taking and never giving. The nature of the true master is to give and give and give, never to take and take and take and take. A master, a spiritual master, is pure service, no expectation of reward. And we can emulate that. Whatever size, shape, form, and circumstances you've taken in this birth has been determined by you, by the actions and samskaras of your previous life. This is what's brought you about the conditions for you to be born into a wealthy family, although this does not necessarily mean that you're going to be happy. You can be born into a wealthy family or a poor family, just as some children are born healthy and some are born very ill. I don't know if I told you the story of my son, the first one. The first child was born a spastic child, mentally retarded. And at that time I had money. I was in big business, so I had the money to go to the best specialists. In the womb, the development of the child had just stopped, said the doctors. I asked, why did it stop? They said they didn't know, that it was just a fluke. Now, there are no flukes. They say that they didn't know the answer. The doctors will say it's just a fluke, it's just coincidental. After trying all that, I started meditating on the child. I went away in seclusion for 3 weeks because the other children were above normal IQ. But this one of them was born retarded. So I went into seclusion for 3 weeks into deep meditation. And you know what I found? I found this child was of such a high spiritual development that he was on the verge of total self-realization. That one experience was all that he needed in the process of this birth. He needed just that little experience to reach the level of self-realization, but he didn't need his mind. Therefore, he was born retarded. Do you see how things work? Now, Gururaj goes on for about another 2 pages, but my intuition is telling me we've said enough, I think, here. And I want to open it up, but basically to some, as Gururaj says, we cannot know our own spiritual progress. We can judge the effects sometimes on others, and sometimes our lives seem to go a lot simpler, but basically it's not ours to know why all this happens. And he went out towards the end and he's pointing out that we're talking about a multi-life effort. Really, one of the difficult things we have to give up is this idea of goal-oriented meditation. As he says, we do our spiritual practices, we carry on, we're just doing it for the sake of doing, as the Gita teaches us. It's in the realm of the spirits, it's in the realm of divinity, how all of this plays out. So, having said that, I think I'm going to open it up. Let me just make sure that I'm not missing something. He goes on and he has elaborate. Well, this part I think is funny because it's going to make you laugh. And because it's controversial. Jesus taught that it's very easy to love a friend. But if you can love an enemy, then you've really risen to the top because you don't see any hatred. And when you can see this, it's another mark of progress. If a person slaps you on one cheek, you give them the other cheek. So let him have some fun. You'll then see how his temper or whatever made him slap you will die down. For example, in your home, say a husband and wife are having a quarrel. Now let's say that one of them just keeps quiet while the other one is shouting. Let's say the husband is shouting, which husbands normally do, instead of the woman. If you take the average, then the husband that is shouting more to the poor, frail woman. But if you just let him shout, let him blow off the steam, then when you go to bed, you can cuddle him and kiss him goodnight. And in the morning, he'll wake up a different man. He'll say, oh, I'm sorry, darling. I was a little angry last night. I think I had a whiskey too much. He'll make some excuse. So let's just let him blow off his steam. But he does not realize that the woman who has darned the sock can also give him a sock. That's what women do. The man raves and runs, but the woman, she's the master. I've known women, so many of them, they are the masters until they reach a true master. Then they become slaves or they become beloveds. The true master always loves them as the beloveds. A couple of comments, because that's going to plug people in, that passage. One thing is are we super conscious of, women being severely beaten and mistreated by men. And it was pointed out to me recently, sometimes the reverse is true. The man is beaten and severely mistreated by the woman. She has a sock. But picture his scenario. Husband shouting, a little drunk. Woman listening. Now she can be sitting there like this, thinking to herself, you son of a bitch. You son of a bitch. Or she can be, I'm so scared. Oh, don't hit me. Picture the woman doing this, looking at him, just like a mother looks at a little child throwing a tantrum. A real patient mother. I realize women, kids throwing a tantrum, you can get upset yourself. Let's say, you're just looking at the child with amused detachment and loving concern. Husband's blowing, and the woman's just looking at him with just open, calm acceptance, like the guru. And she's just like a little kid, letting him blow off steam. Imagine that. Imagine if that attitude is taken, the steam goes right out of the sails. That's what Gururaj is hinting at here. He also says here, very shocking, he says, the woman, she's the master. I've known many women, so many of them, they are the masters until they reach a meal master. Then they either become slaves or they become beloveds. Is he saying some wildly sexist comment about women, slaves or masters? Not really. I'm thinking he's talking about all of us. When we go to the guru, we're always convinced secretly that we're right. Let's check this guru out. I'm going to judge this guru because I know best. So many of them are fakes. I know. I'll check this guy out. So they either come to the guru as masters, and he says, what does he say here? Till they read a meal master. Let's meet the real guru. Then they either become slaves or they become the beloveds. This is very important. It's a good way to end this. A slave means, well, the Bhagwan said we shouldn't eat meat, so I'm never going to eat meat again. Or the Bhagwan said this, or the Buddha said this, and Christ said this. Well, we have to do this now. It's like, I'm a member of this religion. This is my beliefs. I'm going to do everything they say, then I'll be saved. That's being a slave. A beloved means I'm totally devoted to my guru. I'm totally devoted to the divine life. I am a child. I'm an aspect of divinity. I know this to be the case. I forget sometimes, but I know this to be the case. I do this out of profound devotion. This is what in the Gita allowed Arjuna at the very end. He looked at Krishna, his Lord, and he said, thank you. He said, I now understand my error has been dispelled. I'm ready to fight. And he accepted his dharma, his duty of life, out of real devotion to the Lord. I think that's what Gururaj is implying here. He said, that's spiritual progress. That level of devotion is real spiritual progress. All right. Let us unmute all. And forgive me, guys, it's been a long one. I'm going to